on the computer. Okay.
Recording in progress.
Okay.
Okay. Hi, Gary. My name is Akil. I'm a composer here, not at school anymore.
Say your name, Akilo?
Akil.
Akil, okay.
Yes. So I just graduated, and I think I played BioShock Infinite. I started the first one, and I'm getting through it, but just comparing the third game to the first, how would you say you interpreted the music from the earlier games, and how did that influence your choices for Infinite?
Yeah, well, the first game was made by Irrational Games, and the creative director was Ken Levine. And then I went on and I created a style that everyone was happy with, and it worked for, that was Rapture, the undersea city. So that was a style. And then they made BioShock 2, which was not made by Irrational Games. It was made by 2K Novato, which is in Northern California. And they did a good job. It doesn't get the credit that the original game did, because, it was just taking the franchise and making it kind of just doing a reboot. But it was actually quite cool. I really enjoyed that. But that stylistically, it was informed by my first score. Okay, the style didn't change because it was in the same location, and I had more resources though, which was cool because the original BioShock, no one knew it was going to be a hit, so I had a fairly modest orchestral budget. So interestingly enough, no one knew, so they were watching their dollars. So I had more money and enjoyed that quite dramatically, quite significantly. It was great fun. And in some ways that score is even better than my original score, although the original score was innovative in ways that BioShock 2 was not. It was informed by that. But then BioShock Infinite went back to Irrational Games. That was the game they were making. So Ken Levine was again involved. And Ken is a really interesting, very creative developer, or leader. He's involved in every decision. He's a perfectionist. He's like Steve Jobs kind of character, and which can make it difficult to work there. But I mean, you have to really, put in you have to work hard to succeed for Ken. But they hired me. I was really grateful to be back working on a BioShock franchise or a game. But it's very different. It's almost in some ways it's kind of like a mirror image, and it says instead of set in this dark, wet, undersea world, it's set up in the clouds and the bright light, and dirigibles, and there's water, hardly even seawater, I guess the clouds are water. But you're not in Rapture anymore. So, and it's set in a different era, 1912, and it's this sort of Americana city, dystopian, fucked up place, like all Rapture, pretty fucked up too, And so they and I felt like the music should be stylistically unique and different from the original BioShock. Although, if you'll recall, there is one moment where you go to Rapture, where Elizabeth character takes you through some kind of a whatever, she could open these tears in space or whatever. So so I actually wrote a cue that was BioShock, original BioShock, because we were in Rapture, and it actually evolves. The music evolves from being a Rapture to being music for BioShock Infinite, because you end up from one location to the other. So I experimented with a lot of different things, and wasn't really successful for a while. I was struggling to find it. But what happened was they went to E3. I guess familiar with E3 convention. It's in LA, and the Electronic Expo. And they did an early presentation before the game was finished, but they had enough, and the character Elizabeth, which is an AI that accompanies you, she was prominent in the presentation, and all the press wrote about was Elizabeth. It became like the thing. And even though she was prominent in the presentation, she wasn't that prominent in the game. And Ken said, we need to change this game. Elizabeth needs to be Elizabeth centric. And so he literally on the dime, which is kind of the cool thing about Ken. I mean, most people go, well, we've already invested all this money and all this time into doing one thing. We're not going to change, you know. He was like, no, we've got to change, which caused everything to be changed and rethought. But for me, it was like, okay. I mean, I got the message from the company. Elizabeth is really important now. What if I write an Elizabeth theme? Let me write a theme for her, you know, because that would make sense now to do. So without being tasked with that, I wrote something that I felt would be really appropriate. And decided also, because I did remember that Ken was very he really loved the sound of live instruments. That meant a lot to him. And so there's a passion that a real musician can bring, as I think you know. And so I said to the music director, it had not an audio director, it had an audio director and a music director. And Jim Bonney was the music director. I said, what if I work with some live musicians? Is that, you know, can I get a budget for that? And he basically said, no, we're not going to do that. And bearing in mind, this is like a $200 million game. And I thought, you know, couldn't I have like $500 to do that? No, not really. So I said, screw it. I hired a couple of musicians, just a couple of string players, and I recorded it live because I felt like it was important. And he heard it. I sent it to Jim, and he heard it. He goes, this is really cool, but I don't think Ken's gonna like it. So I go, dude, if you don't send it to him, I'm gonna send it to him because I really like it a lot. And I don't remember now, either he sent it to him or I just said, Ken, you got to listen to this, because Ken and I knew each other very well. And he not only did he love it, he went in crazy. He loved it intensely. It was like a revelation to him. You know, he gets really intense when he gets emotional. He was very, I love this. I'm going to write a whole scene to this. It was like, okay, great. And so I thought, okay. And that really gave me an insight into the direction for the score. And I thought, you know what? I don't need an orchestra for this. There's a plan to go to London and give me the London Symphony Orchestra if I needed it. I said, I think this should be done with small string ensembles. I think that would be really cool, like a string quartet, you know? And so I started writing it that way, but I kept telling Jim, I said, man, I want to do this with live. I want to do the mock-ups with live musicians, which, by the way, I've never done before and never done since. But I thought, you know, give me like $800. I can get three players in and we can record this. And he was like, I don't know. Finally, he said yes to that. And then I recorded that, and that was super successful. Really, Ken was totally digging it. So that became the game plan, to record with these small string ensembles and using this style, I don't know, call it Americana, plus for, you know, some eeriness with aleatoric material. And that really worked well. Then also there was the issue of combat. By the way, interesting enough, in the original game, the audio director, Emily Ridgway, who was no longer at Irrational, she didn't like working there. She went elsewhere. I think, where did she go? I don't know. She went to San Francisco and worked at a game company there, and then ended up at Valve for many years. I think she's working at Apple now. We're not really in touch, but so she was like, I can't take. She didn't like the environment there. So there was no combat music in BioShock originally, except for this one little bit at the very end. But after I was done scoring BioShock, she called me and she says, we need combat music. So I went and I wrote combat music, as it turned out. Not a lot of it, like maybe 4 or 5 minutes of it, which they used, and it worked well. So, but we knew we needed a lot of combat music for Bioshock Infinite. So I wrote some orchestral mock-ups that, you know, I didn't want to hire an orchestra for that. And everyone liked it, but Ken. Ken was like, no, this is just, I don't want to do this. This is, he wasn't communicating directly to me, his objections. And people, and I was hearing through the grapevine, you know, there's a whole discussion here. Everybody really likes your combat cue and thinks that combat needs to be orchestral. And Ken is like, no. So I go, well, okay, let me try it with a small string ensemble, see what we get. And Ken was right. I have to say and that's the thing, you know. One thing that can be really creative is someone forces you or whatever, you decide to break what you think is the usual thing, you know, the paradigm. You have a paradigm in your head about how to write music. And then someone forces you to break that. Something really creative can come out of that. So it did. I ended up writing really cool combat music with small string ensembles, and that became very effective. And I owe Ken everything. I won the BAFTA for that score, so that was really cool to win, and got a lot of good positive reaction to the score. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Yes, it did. That was really insightful. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah. Let me get this over here. Here you go.
Hi, I'm Maris. I'm a violinist, and I
Hi, Maris.
wanted to say thank you for thinking it's important to have live musicians. And I don't know anything about composing, so I'm curious to know, like, what stage is the game at in development when you start composing, or like, do they create scenes around your music, or do you like solely create music for things that have already been developed totally?
Yeah, and when they hire you will vary from project to project. I would say it is often in films, it is often after the film has been shot and they've begun post-production when they really seriously start looking for a composer. If they didn't have somebody already in mind, that's when they really start. And then you get hired, and theoretically, ideally, you only start composing the music for a film when it's edited, you know, although these days it's very common for a composer to write music for a scene, and then 2 days later, well, we've completely re-edited it. So then you have to rework your composition to fit the new edit, which is super frustrating, and happens almost never in games. Another cool thing about games, no conforming to re-edits, you know. So it can vary, and so often it's in the middle of the process. That's when you get called. Maybe in 60% of the way through. Although bear in mind, in video games, like a lot of things in life, about 80% of the work gets done in about 20% of the time. So it's all of a sudden like people have been screwing around for like a year, kind of being creative, and all of a sudden, well, we got to finish this game or we're all going to get fired. So everybody gets busy and gets into the intensity of it. And so towards the end, a lot of stuff happens, and sometimes there is a crunch, as they call it, and you kind of get a lot of stuff done that you. Sometimes you get hired and you don't have that much to do for a while. Maybe you're having what sometimes composers will call dream time, where you're just really having fun thinking about creative approaches to the score and little things. But usually you write music for so there's, if you could sort of bifurcate the music, especially in AAA games, into gameplay music, and then there's the cutscenes or cinematics, which are basically CGI movies. Usually CGI, not always, but it's usually CGI movies that you score to picture, just as you would in a film or television show. Those are locked to picture. There's no interactivity. The interactivity is just you're writing music, and it gets dubbed with dialogue and sound effects, and it's done, you know. But gameplay music is where players have free agency to make decisions. So going from point A to point B for one player may take 20 minutes. but another player may have played the game now for the third time. They're going to take like 90 seconds to go from point A because they know exactly where to go, and they don't really need to see all the little Easter eggs that are hidden behind trees and cool stuff that they've already explored. So how do you do that? So there's a lot of techniques that can do it. And I mentioned one earlier, which is just simple loop, you know. So, but usually they'll provide some sort of gameplay video. They don't like to let the video game out of the studio where it's being made because they're nervous about it being, you know, released into the wild, as they say. So they really want to, so what they'll do is someone will play the game at the studio and do a video capture of the gameplay and send it to you. Now, you know that that's just one person playing it one time, so nothing's going to sync up ever again with any other player. It might be close, but never going to be precise. But it gives you the environment. It shows you what it looks like. It shows you what kind of activities are occurring when the gameplay is occurring, and I lock it to my digital audio workstation, which is software that I write music in, to give me a sense of the world, what it feels like, what the music should, how the music should feel, you know, and that's very, very helpful, you know. So that's usually, you're usually there at a point where they have a build. A build is a working version of the game while it's in development. So something's working. You don't have a build. There's the game's all theoretical until something is actually moving and characters are actually doing something, and you're actually solving some puzzle or challenge or combat or whatever it is, you know. And it often looks really funky. It often looks really like blurry and weird, but it's enough. It's enough. It's better than just nothing. Every now and then I have had them just give me some music direction and maybe like a screenshot of something or like some artist rendering, and they say, okay, here's what's happening, right? You know, a 90-second looping cue for this. And I've done that a few times, but not very often. So such a long-winded answer to it varies, but it's often in the middle and or slightly later that you get involved. And these game development cycles can be quite extended. So, I mean, when I've worked on Destroy All Humans, I had 60 days to write 60 minutes of music, which, by the way, having been a television composer, was like a luxury, you know. I mean, usually I write 2 or 3 minutes a day, so it's like, oh, that's plenty of time. Now, it's not uncommon for me to be on a game for a year, 6 months to a year for sure. This is very common, but it means that you can work on more than one project simultaneously as well, because you're just not under that much pressure. So I've worked on 2 projects on a number of occasions, and it's not a problem because, you know, you just have one thing you don't do is tell your creative partners that you're working on 2 projects, because it'll just stress them. You know, you don't. I've learned not to stress my clients. Just make my clients happy. If I'm stressed, I'll, you know, call a therapist or something. Or tell my wife. My wife is a therapist, actually, so that's the therapist I tell. And so, yeah.
Any other questions before I take it? Yeah, go ahead.
Have you played all the games you've scored?
No, but a lot of them. A lot of them. All the BioShock games. I love BioShock. I have to say, I when I started doing Destroy All Humans scoring, I started getting into gaming for the first time in my life, and I really did love it. I mean, like games like, you know, Portal, which I still think is one of the most coolest games ever, and all the Destroy All Human games and BioShock games. Those I really did enjoy them. Then I started working on some of these really long games like Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War, like 30, 40 hours of your time to kind of get through them. And I would start them and like kind of, some of these games, this is me now. I feel like they should pay me. I'm like working really hard. I'm working so freaking hard to play these games. I feel like I should get paid. So it's like a job, you know? So that said, if Portal 3 came out, I would buy it tomorrow. That's a game that totally thrilled me, and such a cool, you know, puzzle experience. So yeah, I do try to play the games that I do, but if they're really like, I haven't played Forspoken yet, which is also quite a commitment of time, and I've just been busy. So not always. But don't tell anyone.
No, we won't tell. We won't tell. Any other questions before I take it back? Yeah, go ahead.
All right, so to go back to your time in the early days working with Mike Post and Pete Carpenter, how much of that was collaborative and they would give you like things to work off of, or they would, you would go back and forth with them on ideas, or was it just they gave you free reign, just compose music?
Well, what would happen is we would have spotting sessions. And, tradition, like if you spot a film, usually the director's there and maybe a producer, and you're going through it carefully, or it's even like has temp music in it. So it's already pre-spotted. But in this instance, this was like a lot of these shows were by a producer named Stephen Cannell, who had a long relationship with Mike and Pete and totally trusted them. So basically he would just send over the film and go, you guys spot it and you guys score it, and totally trust you, So we would meet with either Mike or Pete, one or the other, because one of them would be in charge of a single show, because they just had so much going on. They were really busy. And so one of them would be sort of the supervising composer. And then you would join the spotting session, and the music editor would be there taking notes, and you decide where all the music goes. You spot it. And then that whoever was Mike or Pete would say, okay, Garry, you do the bad guys. There's a whole bunch of scenes with the bad guys. You'd write a bad guy theme and whatever. And then, okay, another guy does the car chases or whatever, or you do the, and there'd be like 2 or 3 of us on each show, but the thing was they had very iconic themes, those shows. So you were expected to use those themes whenever appropriate. So you had thematic material available to you when appropriate. If, however, you're writing for and each character had their own sort of theme that you would, when appropriate, if that character's like front and center, it would make sense to use their theme, or at least a snippet of it, just hint at it. You don't have to play the whole thing. You just kind of do it in his style, one of the A-Team style. And then if you are writing like the bad guys theme, that you'd have to come up with an original bad guys theme. There are always bad guys in those, like the A-Team, whatever. And then you would kind of create your own. And they trusted us. They would hear the music for the first time at the recording session.
Wow.
When I first started, Pete was sort of the guy that hired me, and so I brought my cues over for the first couple of shows and showed it to him before the session to make sure he wanted to make sure that I wasn't just blowing it, And he made some suggestions, etc. And I took home a whole bunch of their scores and studied them, because that had a style, and the style, by the way, was an orchestra with a pop band, a band inside of it. And literally the orchestra was like almost always the same, at least in those days. There'd be like, I don't know, 9 or 10 violins, 8 cello, no double basses, no violas. There'd be like woodwinds, 3, 3, or 2, 2, and 2. So 2 flutes, 2 clarinets, 2 oboes, I think. Maybe an oboe and a bassoon. There'd be brass in 3, so 3 horns, 3 trumpets, 3 trombones, usually 2 tenors, 1 bass, to give you, and the 3, you wanted 3 because it was very triadic music, so it made sense. You'd have a couple of percussion players, and then you had a pop band, and the band sat by themselves or in a unique section of the recording studio, and it'd be like a keyboard player, and the keyboard player would play a synthesizer, clavinet, which is kind of an early synthesis, kind of electronic clavinet, piano, and celesta, have like those instruments available to you. Then you'd have a guitar player who could play acoustic guitar, electric guitar. You'd have an electric bass player, and you'd have a drummer. And so that would be the band. And that was the style of the music, to have this pop band in the middle of it. But once Pete and Mike trusted me, nobody was checking up on me. I would just show up with the music, and they didn't want to check up on us. They were busy. The whole idea was to take the burden off of them, and that they could trust us to just totally, do great work.
Awesome. Thank you.
Anyone? No? No questions? Okay. Thanks. I have a few questions. So I kind of wanted to ask, I'm also primarily a violinist and music educator, so I'm not a composer either. But I was curious if you could talk a little bit more. You mentioned, of course, the innovative things that happened in the original BioShock score, and just to talk about that sort of collaboration and what it's like, because there's so much music in BioShock, whether it's classic American jazz tunes, or there's even like some classical music in there, what that kind of collaboration looks like when that music goes in there, or your music, and what the director wants, and things like that.
Yeah, there is what you would call source music, licensed music, where they used stuff from Tchaikovsky's, what was it? His Christmas music.
The Nutcracker.
The Nutcracker. He used some Nutcracker, and he used they used songs from like the 40s and 50s, and they created a nice ironic mood in the game. They worked really well, and that I had nothing to do with writing that or arranging that or putting it together or even deciding that. That was all done by, I believe, Emily. And I didn't even know what she never said, okay, your music's going to go near this. I never even knew about it until I played the game, to be honest with you. No one ever told me about it. I remember her calling me, asking me about the Nutcracker one day. Someone needs the Nutcracker. Which is the scene where, and I helped her with that. I go, okay, that's, whatever. But that was just how it worked. And I thought they were some really brilliant choices with that. I wrote I wrote a jazz piano piece for the game. And also there's a piece of music for solo piano they called Cohen's Masterpiece.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about that too.
Yeah, so that was so Emily said, okay, there's this character named Sander Cohen, and he's written some music, and she didn't mention that he blows up the pianist. I didn't know that.
That is correct. He does do that.
That's very satisfying to see, of course, a pianist who's not playing your music right be blown up. Why not? No, of course, that would get better performances, don't you know? In any event, so the direction was just, okay, he's writing this music. So my thought on that was, well, he might be someone like Rachmaninoff. Now, if you know anything about Rachmaninoff, he was a brilliant composer, a great, like world-class pianist. But his music, when he was writing it, was sort of like a throwback to the previous, like the late Romantic period, versus he wasn't writing, he wasn't a Prokofiev or a Bartok or Stravinsky, or what I mean. He was basically writing late Romantic piano concertos and piano music. So I thought, well, okay, maybe that Sander Cohen is kind of like that, and he would write something kind of like, this is what classical music should sound like. The hell with all this, So that was the character I gave him in my own head, and I wrote. Emily actually sent me a piece of music by Philip Glass, which I thought was wrong for direction. I go, no, I don't think that's right. So then I wrote He's not a Philip Glass. He's more of a rock, whatever. But so I wrote what I wrote, and she loved it, and they loved it so much that they ended up not only using it for that one moment where, you know, the character is, you know, unhappily for him, he's like chained to the piano, I think, isn't he? He's like, wow, he's like, I can't really get away, and he gets his life ends. But in any event, they ended up using it as score in the rest of the of that level, you know. So that was kind of cool. They really liked it, and a lot of people have played it. It's really nice to hear people. I make it available for free on my website just to download the score for that, and people like to play it. So I think that's wonderful.
Oh, that's really nice of you to make it available. Yeah, that's a really cool part. That's why I was hoping you would talk about it. I was wondering if you could talk more about kind of the inspirations you had specifically for writing the score for the first BioShock, and kind of how you approached it from the very beginning, if you had ideas on what kinds of things you would use or direction on what kinds of things you would use for that score.
Good. I thought more about that score in a deep way than anything I've worked on before or since. Because I got that direction from Emily. It shouldn't sound like any other film, TV, or game.
Right.
And I think I just sensed that there was some really kind of cool opportunity. It was just sort of like this. I sensed there was something special about this game, and that it could be an opportunity for me. And whatever, I just wanted to do a good job. I was just trying to, you know, and obviously the key to working is like you're doing a good job and making your employers happy with what you score. So I'm always trying to do that. But I thought, okay, there's just what's going on in BioShock. So there's this Andrew Ryan is the, you know, guy who builds the city. And the whole point of it is to give creative people complete freedom to unlock them from the tethers of the world and let them kind of, you know, this sort of Ayn Rand philosophy, which is central to this world. And so I thought, okay, that might be, so that aspect of it could be maybe portrayed by like early mid 20th century classical music, and they're like Bartok and, you know, Stravinsky and Prokofiev. Those were my influences for that. So like Welcome to Rapture has that perhaps style. Then there's also, I thought, the tragic aspects of it, of the game, because it's sort of, you know, through all history, perhaps, you know, humans have been trying to create a utopia, and it usually ends up being a murder factory, you know, like the Soviet Union or Nazi Germany. Pretty horrible, you know. So so this is another failed, this is a dystopia, not a utopia. Want it to be. So I thought there was something tragic about that, and I wrote some sad music. Then of course it's a horror, it's a zombie game in a way, you know, you know, with splicers or whatever. And so I thought sort of aleatoric writing could be appropriate for that, just to create the eeriness and scariness. If you know what, you guys, I'm assuming, know what aleatoric means.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So there's that aspect of it. And then I had another thought too that would be kind of cool. Was I don't know if you've heard the term musique concrète. Have you heard this term? Yeah, so this post World War II French style of like music montages using real instruments, but also sounds from the world, and kind of creating these sort of unique, and it made possible by the new, at that time, new technology of recording, you know, of like tape recording, or I think they had wire recorders. They had technology that permitted this to be possible. So I thought throwing in some real world sounds. So like, for instance, in some cues, you hear like a buoy bell, because it's this, what at the time was called the fisheries. I was writing music for something they asked me to write for the fisheries. And I found this, and I you know, I used a website called the freesound.org. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. It's like, that's a cool place to go. I mean, like 93.2% of the sounds of there are horrible, but the rest, I just made up. It was the old joke, but 37.6% of all statistics are made up right on the spot, including that one.
Right.
So, I mean, but it has, there are some, I mean, it has search options. So I some of the sounds I found like a concertina sound, you know. So I was thinking like some old fisherman sitting by the wharf playing a concertina. Hold on, let me unplug. Guys, can you hold on one second? My wife doesn't know I'm talking. Hold on.
Absolutely. You make good use of freesounds.org.
Every day.
What's your favorite
your-
sound?
I was gonna ask that.
You want to ask him?
There's like literally millions.
You don't have a favorite?
Not really. I guess like air horn.
That's a good one.
That was really cool. It's like that thing Jason was talking about, just like distorting them, like just grab a sound. Like, oh, that's cool.
The
But it
chicken
still
wire.
sounds cool.
All right.
Like 3 octaves down.
Did I answer your last question?
Yes, you did. Yeah. Yeah, you did. I was just trying to think. I'm also trying to come back into the space. I was curious if you could talk, because I believe you didn't obviously have video game scoring classes when you were studying.
No, I knew nothing about video game. I learned it in the streets.
Well,
literally on the job training.
so I was curious if you could talk now, being on the other side and actually being able to educate at UCLA and hear what it feels like to.
Not UCLA, USC.
Oh, sorry, USC.
We don't use the term. We don't say those that use letters here.
Yeah, USC.
There is a rival. There's a crosstown rivalry between.
Right. I meant USC. It was my
I'm
mistake.
kidding. I'm
But
just kidding.
yeah, being a pedagogue of video game scoring now, what that's like being on that side, and then you know, why you feel that that's even an important include in university education, which of course isn't super common at the moment. So I was wondering if you could talk about that.
Well, you know, USC is, I think, again, I'm not certain of this, but I believe it's the first university that offered a program
Correct.
for scoring to picture, you know.
Yeah,
So it used to be called SMP-TV, scoring for motion pictures and television. But prior to me getting there, they had already a video game scoring class, although it was an elective initially, although most people took it. So when I came there, it was you know, an elective, but it's part of the courses now. And it was interesting because the attitude of the students when I first started working there was, I'm not really sure I care about video games. You know, maybe, and you know, whatever, or I don't want to score video games. I just want to score film. That has gone 180 now. I have a lot of students say, I only want to score video games. And I said the same thing to them as I said to the people who wanted to. I said, you should score anything anybody pays you to write music for. It's like, get the gig, freaking do it, make a living. And you never know, a video game can help you get a film. A film can help you get a video game, whatever, you know. So, but there is a huge shift in interest. Of course, the video game industry, as I'm sure you probably know, is bigger than film and television combined. Like significantly larger as in terms of income and, you know, money spent. Video games is huge. So to ignore it, you do so at your own peril, I think. I don't know. I mean, I for the reasons I told you earlier, I love scoring video games, and I do think that it's quite valuable for the students. And my classes are not exclusively about video games. I talk about all my experience, whether it's recording live musicians or the business aspects of it. I talk about performing rights income and royalties of all kinds. the business aspect of it is important because you have to become adept at making, unless you've inherited a lot of money, you have to like pay your bills, unless you want to be doing a side gig and also composing. So the idea is to how do I make a living? How do I pay my bills and can focus full time on these opportunities? So I consider all that important. And but yeah, I mean my assignments, because I don't really have any tests, or there's one written assignment, which is the very first assignment, which is to describe the score of some really cool video game that has a really interesting score. But after that, they're writing music. Writing music, and I give them simple assignments from looping cues to stingers to layers to combat music. And I have developed a number of, lectures, or whatever you want to call it. Lectures, some lectures always sound sort of annoying. I'm lecturing you. Like my mom's lecturing me. It always sounds shitty. But my talks on these subjects, I think are valuable, and the students, I think, find them valuable. And so I do think it's useful to take these courses. But if they were available back then, I'll tell you what's interesting. I did, after I graduated from USC, UCLA, we can say UCLA had an extension class in scoring for films, taught by a guy named Don Ray, who was a former CBS music supervisor and a composer himself. And it was the first class ever in LA in scoring, dedicated to that subject, And a lot of the people who were in the class composers are people I still know and are still working. Mark Waters now heads up Eastman School of Music's their program. Walter Murphy has done tons of stuff for film and TV and other composers. So it was that was a great class. I really did enjoy that class. And out of that came opportunities. We got recording opportunities. So it included writing music and getting it performed by orchestras. And a couple of the cues. I talked about getting hired by Mike Post and Pete Carpenter, but actually, before I got hired, I had a friend, the same guy who, by the way, who's hired me for that video game back in the 1990s. His name was Robbie Weaver. His father was a successful television actor. And he was doing a show that Mike Post and Pete Carpenter were scoring. And I just asked if I could attend. And so I went to a live recording session. Then I asked Mike, or rather Pete. Pete was the more approachable of the two. Could I come? And he goes, yeah, come anytime. He's a really friendly, nice guy. And I came, and I didn't even ask. He said, you got a demo? And I go, yeah. I mean, I should have asked him long before that if he'd listened to my demo, but I didn't even, I don't know, I should have. But he listened, and some of the music I put on it, I had recorded during my experience in that class, the Don Ray class at UCLA Extension. So that helped me get that gig because the music I did was part of my demo.
Yeah. That's awesome. I mean, I see it becoming incredibly more popular, and the student populations in general that I've worked with tend to also be gravitating towards the side of the 180 you speak towards, that they want to score video game music. And I think that drive is kind of what pushed this university to incorporate something like that. How did you get involved with IU? I'm just curious because I don't quite know the whole narrative there.
Well, because I am friends with Larry Grape.
Right.
And he heads that program. And I've known Larry for many years before we just, we weren't like close friends, but we were just like, acquaintances, friendly acquaintances. So every time I'd see him, we liked each other and would chat and whatever. And then he started doing this program on his own near his house in San Diego, at Palomar, and in this he just created his own program, scoring for films, and then he extended it to include video games. And he called me and said, "Hey, you want to do this?" And I go, "Yeah, why not?" It was at a cabin in the forest. It was like, how cool is that, you know? I went up to the cabin, and it's beautiful up there. I mean, it's like you're in the forest, and you spend a night there, and at night we're just hanging around, you know, drinking whiskey, and it was just fun, you know. So that was really so. I just was a participant in his Palomar program, and then when he got hired at IU, he invited me to give a lecture there a few years ago, which I did. And then he called me last year, I forget when exactly, and asked me if I wanted to teach this class. And I said, I thought about it a little bit. And I said, yeah, okay, I'd do that. Why not? And it turned out to be very enjoyable. I'm really enjoying the class. It's a good group of very creative composers, and we're gonna have a live session, aren't we?
Is anyone here in the class?
Yeah.
Oh, both of you are in that
We're
class?
both
Gabriel is in the class.
Hi.
How you doing, man?
How good? How are you?
Really good, really good. So yeah, and I'll take credit for getting that live session going, because it wasn't part of the class, but I said, Larry, we should do this, and he was like, I said, can you find the money? And he did. He found the budget, and so hopefully you guys won't hate me come Monday. It goes really well. It's this coming Sunday we record, and I'm confident it'll be really, really, really good. But we'll know on Sunday. I've had a lot of remote sessions. So remote recording, to those of you who may or may not be familiar, is that recording, you know, just you're basically listening on the computer, and you get a visual of the orchestra, so you can see the orchestra, and you can talk to the conductor, and you're getting good quality audio, or decent quality audio. So you can hear the score or the recording and approve a take and move on or whatever. So and it's done in Budapest. There's a number of Eastern European. I gotta turn that on. There's a number of Eastern European orchestras that do this, including Budapest. There's one in Macedonia. There's one in Sofia, Bulgaria. There's another program in Prague, and Bratislava. So there's a whole bunch of these Eastern European orchestras that have found this to be lucrative, I guess, and provided at a much lower cost than recording, like in London or LA or something, which makes it very, very affordable.
Cool. Actually, since we're on that topic of live recording, could you talk a little bit more about what it's like working with live musicians? And I assume you've had some soloists that you've worked with in the past, and what it's like getting the music to them or communicating efficiently, how much time they usually get to provide you with the material you're looking for, especially as a violinist, like interested in this work in the future, like what that kind of looks like.
Yeah, of course, that has evolved over time. It used to be that whenever we had a recording session, someone you had to show up at a recording studio and record that player, But now with people can record themselves at home, and I've done that a number of times with one of my former students. Is a wonderful violinist, and I call him and I go, hey, I need a couple violin parts, and I'll send over the music, and he'll do a few takes for me and send them back, send me a stem back. And it works out really, really well, my favorite part, just really creative, fun part, is going to a studio where the orchestra is there and you can conduct yourself if you feel competent enough to conduct, and hearing your music performed. That's like the best. That's my favorite thing. That's my favorite part of the whole process. Really, it's really just a blast, to hear your music live, and just coming to live is cool. It's amazing. But there's other ways to do it. As I said, you could record one person, and when I say so you could do it virtually where you have the whole orchestra and then you're listening in while they're recording, because you need to give them feedback and make sure you have a good take and maybe change something if you need to. Or you could have just, if it's just one person that's just sort of doing overdub and adding some kind of cool veneer to it, solo violin, solo cello, oboe, whatever it is, flugelhorn, having them do it and then send you a stem and just mix it in with your live or your samples. They can really bring it to life and make it sound way better, So that's really a valuable tool, and you can do it for a pretty modest amount of money. Sometimes a couple $100 can take a cue from one level and really bring it up a notch or two, because you've added this live beautiful performance that I've worked with some great musicians. My favorite place to record is here in LA, to be honest. The BioShock stuff, the solo violin, was recorded by Martin Chalafour, who's the principal concertmaster of the Los Angeles Philharmonic, and he's amazing. I mean, he's like, I like, if you know the music, Welcome to Rapture, that's Martin, and I brought him in after I recorded the strings that had the string orchestra, and I sent him the parts ahead of time. I sent him the PDFs, just as and he rehearsed them. He was like his first performance, because that's not that easy to play, and he nailed it. I mean, like, it just sounded amazing the first take. And also his violin is a Stradivarius, which I think is not a bad fiddle too. Because I said to him, I go, got that. I said to Dan, my engineer, I go, that fiddle sounds really good. So after the take, I go, and he's just, I'm in the booth, and he's like, what kind of an instrument? What is that violin? He goes, it's a Strat. He goes, oh, very cool. It sounds good. No wonder no wonder they cost millions of dollars, whatever. So yeah, I mean, work with him. There's another guy who did all the cello stuff. His name is Armin Tuzjikian, who's not doesn't play with the LA Phil, I don't believe, although he plays with various orchestras, but he's really a studio musician, and he's played with he's played with John Williams many times. When Jerry Goldsmith was alive, he's sort of in my age bracket, and his sound is so beautiful. I love Armin's playing. It's just gorgeous, beautiful cello playing. So, and there's a lot of players like that, in LA, but in many places, of course, there's like very phenomenal musicians. So, I mean, I think if depending on the style of music, if you have a style of music that's synths, and then obviously you don't need live players necessarily to do that. Although there's a guy here in LA who plays. He makes his own sounds, and he triggers them with an EWI.
Oh, cool. And
he's been working for Tom Newman for like 30 years, Steve, and his stuff he's adds so much cool stuff, but like he'll just create sounds, and he has like 1 million sounds, and he'll go, what about this? And it's like, oh wow, yeah, let's do that. Let's try that. And that's cool. That's the cool thing, to have him come over to my studio right here, have him sit next to me and try shit, and go, oh yeah, let's try that. Oh, you end up with like too much good stuff. Then you have to like decide which takes to use and which takes to kind of, But even the stuff that I don't use, I end up making like little libraries out of it, because they're like really cool, like sounds that I can then drop into something else. So there's these unique musicians that are just can really add an amazing vibe and be creative. And he does that with Tom. Tom works with like 2 or 3 musicians like that, and they just sometimes Tom just brings one and they just improvise, and then he goes, yeah, that's it. So sort of cheap. But he comes often, they're coming up with kind of a groove, kind of and sort of, you hear these famous Tom Newman grooves. Often they're improvised with Tom sort of like leading the pack, sitting and listening, going, yeah, that's it,
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I certainly hope to get to work with some game composers to be a studio musician at some point too.
I'll tell you, Michael, one thing you might do, go to GDC.
All right.
Seriously, because what is her name? There's this woman who's like a woodwind player, and she started going to GDC.
Were there any other questions?
Kristen Naugus, Nauiges. Just go to her website, which is at here. I'll give you her.
Okay. I don't think I should put it right.
I'm going to put it in the. I'll put it in the chat. And she's doing it all the time now. She does a ton of work, and she doesn't live in LA. She lives like, I think, in Virginia or something. And she plays like a lot of different woodwind instruments. You go to her website, you'll see she's got a page with all of her instruments on it. It's called field-of-reeds.net. And I call her to do woodwind parts, and she does these beautiful, whether it's the flute or the oboe, you name it, she can do it. Bassoon, I don't know how she plays all those instruments, but she's amazing. So
yeah. So you're saying I should go to GDC though?
She does. She goes to GDC, and I think it got her a lot of work.
Oh, okay. All right. I'll be there.
Yeah, I'm not guaranteeing it. You can go to GDC.
No, but
Gary's full of shit. I just wasted like thousands of dollars in this flight and hotel, and I got mugged in San Francisco. What the fuck?
No, I'd love to go. I've only just started going to these things. This year was my first year going to MacFest, and I met Videri there, and I've been playing with them every now and then. So I
know the Videri folks. They're they're great.
Yeah, I've been subbing for them for a little bit this year, so it's been really amazing. So I definitely want to go to more of these events for sure, and meet as many people as possible.
Yeah, Videri has played at like Gang Awards stuff, and they played a lot of my music. They're wonderful. I really like them.
Yeah, we just published a string orchestra piece together, so I've been really enjoying my time with them. So yeah, it's been great. Let's see if there's any more questions before we kind of. Do you have another question?
Yeah,
okay. Take it away.
Okay, so this is going off of what you said before about employing musique concrète, and then also like the iwi sample triggering. So what other fun new technologies, because I love sound design and music. You talked about free sound and just downloading things and throwing them in there. I do that a lot because it's a lot of fun to do. So what kind of new things do you think are going to be in the scores of tomorrow? Or do you think that are particularly interesting?
Oh gosh, I don't know. That's a moving target. There's always new sounds. There's always new samples coming out. I do like the, when you have a human, as opposed to just buying a sample library and then you have the sound that everybody else has. But if you have something where you have a human who's like playing it in some unique way, I think that is really cool. They can, because we're just buying stuff off the shelf and we're putting it in our library, and that can be very useful. I know, and I do it myself. But when someone actually performs it in some unique, special way, that really, I think, can be a cool ticket to something unique and special. I don't have any guides for what the new sound is, but it's just there's a fire hose of new sounds coming at us. It's like there's so much stuff happening. But whenever you can have somebody who really knows how to manipulate those sounds, or or yourself, if you can learn how to use some of these synth plugins, Omnisphere or whatever. There's a lot, like with Omnisphere, shit, you can do a lot with that. If you want to, if you can program Omnisphere, it's like it opens up a ton of cool things that you can do with it. So I would say if you can, and even Contact, it has its own really cool ways to manipulate the audio. And so if you are a nerd enough to like get into tweaking with these things and experimenting with sounds, I think that is a real advantage. I'm not that much of that. I'd rather kind of hire someone to kind of do it themselves. Like, if I have a day when I'm not working, I'm not going to go into Omnisphere and try to figure out how to program it. But I do recommend it if it's your thing. I mean, some people are sort of built for that. Some people are just like, no, not so much, So I don't have any epiphany for you right now, other than there's a ton of cool ways to manipulate audio. I mean, to me, I still like an orchestra is like, to me, like the greatest tool ever, emotional tool. But that's me, maybe because I'm old-fashioned in that way. I do love working with an orchestra very much,
Best way to go. Humans, like you said.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Sure.
I think that's definitely, I am that kind of nerd. So I will definitely keep digging into that.
Yes, there's so much you can do with. I know that like Omnisphere is very, very interesting application plugin, and as is Contact, where you have the what they call it in Contact, where you can manipulate the sounds. There's I forget what they call it. There's but you can do some really cool things in Contact that's just built in. It's just part of the process. You can take a sample, and then you can, and that's what Steve's done for me. Like I'll send him a bunch of samples, and he'll just send me like, oh, what about he'll send me like 30 sounds. Go, what do you like any of these? And I go, oh shit, man, there's like a lot of gold here. This is cool. This is cool stuff. And then I just have to decide,
Awesome.
Oh, yeah.
All right, well, in our closing questions, I'm wondering if you can maybe talk to us about anything you're currently working on that you're allowed to talk about, something you're currently working on. And if not, maybe just talk about any advice you might have for those of us who are trying to work in the field. So in the future.
Well, if there's, I can't really talk about what I'm working on, but if there's any, I think that there's so many things that are useful tools, but I think if there's one thing is like, I think you really, if you want to be a professional composer for film, television, games, I think you have to want it kind of very, very intensely, because it's very competitive. It's not an easy life, and so I think you need to look at your own motivation and see how motivated you are to do it, because I think you have to be very motivated to succeed at it. The people who I see as successful are generally super motivated and somewhat lucky. I think luck plays into everything, but what's the old cliche about the baseball players is, the more I'm up at bat, the luckier I get. It's like literally the more you're playing, the more you put yourself out there, the more opportunities you get. If you're just sitting at home waiting for the phone to ring, that's probably not going to happen. So you have to get out there. You have to be motivated. You have to meet people. You have to develop your skills, your technical skills, your creative skills. All this is this whole panoply of things that you need to do to be successful. But I think at the base of it is you have to be motivated, because motivation is what gives us that passion. And motivation can be fear-based as well. I mean, I know that maybe people don't like to hear that. It's like, I got to pay my bills. I better get a job. I actually have to make a living. I had a family. I had to earn an income, or I was like really screwed. It's really, I was really going to be in trouble. So that kind of motivation is intense, and does get you out there and pushes you, and all of a sudden stuff that you don't expect, like your resume sitting on a fax machine in 2004 at THQ, and somebody accidentally seeing it who was your girlfriend's roommate from college. Some weird shit like that happens.
Yeah.
So
that's
check
great.
your motivation. Make sure, otherwise choose something that maybe is more practical. But if you have to do this, then you absolutely should do it. It's an amazing way to make a living, and anybody who does it, I salute you for really taking a risk, and doing something, with your life that really makes you satisfied and happy, and really gives you a meaningful reason for waking up each morning.
Yeah, I think all of us here are definitely motivated by fear on the regular. So,
I mean, it is. I mean, because that's the way we're structured, from
no, it
ancient
is. I mean that completely
peoples,
literally. Yeah.
Yeah. Like either you kill that animal and you eat it, or it's
Yeah,
kill
we're
you and it's
screwed
gonna
right
eat you.
now.
What's that line from The Big Lebowski? Sometimes you eat the bar, and sometimes the bar eats you.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to meet you, myself, and talk with you. I know you're teaching here, but I'm not in the class, so it's been a pleasure to get to meet you. And hopefully we can keep in touch and keep talking about video game things going forward.
Hey, my
really
pleasure.
appreciate it. Yeah, thank you so much.
Sure. Bye, everybody. Gabriel, I'll see you Friday.